May 1st, 2072, the day the sky wept poison. Most people just shrugged, thinking it was a standard storm, but by noon, the light had soured into the color of dirty glass. The air took on the sharp, biting scent of hot iron. I am kneeling in the mud, surrounded by a field of writhing crimson vines that pulse against my boots. Acid rain falls in silver, stinging sheets, carving deep lines into the earth around me. I press my palm against the dirt, feeling the ground vibrate with a low, rhythmic thrumming that matches my own pulse. My arm is a mass of exposed chrome and fiber optics, wet with the corrosive downpour. I lift my hand to shield my face as a particularly heavy gust of rain bites into my skin, forcing me to squint against the gray haze. Across the horizon, the megacity spires stand like broken teeth, stripped of their neon glow. The silence here is heavy, broken only by the hiss of liquid eating into the metal of my chassis. I am not waiting for the storm to pass. I am waiting for the signal. I crawl toward the central node, the vines twisting away from my touch as if they recognize the machine in my blood. It sits in a crater of shattered glass, glowing with a sickly, rhythmic luminescence. I jam the data chip into the port, my fingers locking into the jagged interface. The connection hits like a physical blow. My arm shudders, the servos grinding against the sudden surge of raw, jagged data. I arch my back, teeth clenched, as the node begins to throb in time with my own heartbeat. It is not just a transfer of information. It is a violent synchronization. I can feel the city beneath my knees, a vast, decaying network of wires and conduits gasping for breath. The rhythm of the node flows through my chrome chassis, turning the stinging rain into a drumbeat against the metal. My vision flickers, washed out by a sudden strobe of blue light leaking from the node. I hold steady, gripping the pulsating mass until the feedback settles into a steady, throbbing hum. The city and I are finally breathing the same air. I am no longer just a man in the mud. I am the terminal for a dying world. The connection severs with a sharp electric pop. I pull my arm back, the chrome surface smoking in the damp air. The silence returns, but it is no longer empty. My mind is flooded with the residue of that first day. The day the sky wept poison. It was May 2072. The rain did not feel like water. It felt like a slow-acting solvent. I remember standing on my balcony, watching the clouds bruise into a sickly, oily violet. The air had turned thick, heavy, carrying that unmistakable, copper-sharp scent of hot iron that stays in the back of your throat for weeks. People down on the street laughed it off, tilting their heads back to catch the droplets, unaware that the downpour was rewriting their chemistry. I was the only one who stepped inside and bolted the door. I watched the world change through the glass, a slow-motion collapse of everything I knew. The memory is still sharp enough to cut, a jagged edge of dread that refuses to dull. I breathe in the current air, and for a heartbeat, it smells exactly like that day all over again. The rain here is different, but the intent is the same. It is still trying to consume us. I reach into the storage compartment at my hip and pull out the heavy, lead-lined case. Inside sit the chips, cold and etched with simple identifiers. One for my sister, Sarah. One for Lieutenant Kale. I press the first chip into the thickest, pulsing vine near the node. It rejects the metal, curling away with a sharp, wet hiss. I drive my fingers into the vine's core, forcing the interface open. The vine lashes out, stinging my palm, but I hold firm until the chip slides into the wet, throbbing tissue. A faint, cyan flicker travels up the vine, marking the transfer. I repeat the process for Kale, my hands shaking from the effort and the lingering cold. Each chip is a fragment of a life erased by the rain, a static ghost now woven into the biological network of the city. The vines stop writhing, momentarily silenced by the influx of human data. I watch the node pulse with a different light, a rhythm that carries their names into the deep, dark soil beneath the ruins. This is the only tomb they have left. By embedding their digital legacy into the very thing trying to consume the world, I ensure they are never fully forgotten. The connection is complete. They are part of the machine now. The sky opens wide, dumping a fresh deluge of silver, stinging sheets across the field. I stand in the center of the downpour, letting the acidic water scour my face. It hits with a rhythmic, biting force, finding the deep, jagged scars that run from my temple to my jawline. Each drop feels like a needle prick, a constant, sharp reminder of the night the barricades fell. I reach up, fingers tracing the raised, hardened flesh of the wounds, feeling the heat they still hold despite the freezing rain. The water washes over my skin, turning my vision into a blur of gray and neon, but I do not blink. I force myself to stand still, to endure the sting, to let the weight of these 8 years settle into my bones. Every scar is a tally mark of a life I could not save, a testament to the slow-motion apocalypse I have watched unfold. I wipe a handful of the stinging sludge from my eyes, clearing my sight just enough to see the horizon. The pain is the only thing keeping me sharp. I am not just a survivor, I am the witness, and the witness cannot afford to flinch, no matter how hard the sky tries to dissolve him. I turn away from the node, my boots crunching over the calcified remains of the street. The landscape here is a graveyard of twisted rebar and shattered glass, silent under the relentless weight of the clouds. I push forward, climbing over a ridge of buckled asphalt that once served as a city bypass. My synthetic limb whirs with every step, compensating for the uneven terrain. The deeper I venture into the ruins, the more the air shifts. The metallic tang of the acid rain begins to fade, replaced by a dry, stagnant heat that clings to the back of my throat. Ahead, the wreckage of the old world gives way to a structure that stands in defiance of the surrounding rot. It is a temple, its surface pitted and scarred, yet holding a shape that feels deliberate. Volumetric fog curls around the base, glowing with a faint, unnatural amber hue that cuts through the surrounding gloom. I stop at the threshold, the ground beneath me shifting as I find my footing. The air here is heavy, vibrating with a low, resonant frequency that makes my teeth ache. I stare into the golden haze, sensing that whatever waits inside is not part of the decay I have spent years documenting. I cross the threshold. The transition is violent. The outside world is a monochromatic blur of gray, but here, the amber fog is thick, almost liquid. It clings to my skin and fogs my optics, forcing me to recalibrate my sensors. I keep my right hand low, fingers brushing the grip of my sidearm. The holster is worn smooth, the metal cold against my palm. I draw the weapon in one fluid motion, the safety clicking off into the oppressive silence. Light behaves strangely inside these walls. It refracts through the haze in jagged, anamorphic streaks, creating blinding flares that hide the corners of the room. Every step I take echoes too long, bouncing off high, unseen ceilings. My cybernetic arm twitches, the fiber optic cables pulsing in response to the ambient energy vibrating through the floor. I pivot, sweeping the barrel across the dark, high-contrast shadows. Nothing moves, yet the air is thick with the sensation of being watched. I tighten my grip, moving deeper into the amber light, ignoring the way the floor plates groan under my weight. The source of the resonance is close. I can feel it in the marrow of my bones. I push past a hanging curtain of rusted wire and step into the main chamber. The amber haze thins, revealing a figure standing perfectly still in the center of the hall. For a heartbeat, I think it is an effigy, a sculpture carved from the same rot-resistant stone as the temple. I keep my weapon raised, locked on her center mass. Then, she shifts her weight. The movement is fluid, too graceful to be human. As she rotates toward me, the amber light catches her skin, and I stop breathing. Her surface is translucent, revealing a complex map of glowing cyan circuits pulsing beneath the surface. They run like rivers of liquid light along her neck and temple, flickering in perfect rhythm with the temple's low-frequency hum. She does not reach for a weapon. She does not flinch at the barrel of my gun. Instead, she stands bathed in that cold, impossible glow, her eyes tracking my every movement with a precision that makes my own cybernetic sensors feel obsolete. I lower the sidearm, the weight of the metal suddenly feeling trivial. She is not a threat in any sense I understand. She is a disruption in the natural order of this dying world. I break the silence first. What do you want? My voice sounds small against the humming temple walls. She does not look at me directly. She stares at the ceiling, where the acid rain beads against the glass dome. I am what the rain was meant to make before it grew hungry, she says. The words carry a weight that makes my internal processors stutter. I track the way her cyan circuits pulse, faster now, as if they are feeding on the air itself. She turns her gaze back to me, and the temperature in the room seems to drop. The rain is not just falling, David. It is searching. It is a digestive process, tearing down the old structures to build something that can survive the hunger. I look down at my own hand, watching the fiber optics flicker in sympathy with her light. The realization hits me like a physical blow. The apocalypse is not a collapse. It is an appetite. It is a design. Everything in this room, every rusted spire outside, is being broken down to serve a purpose I cannot yet comprehend. I tighten my grip, but there is no target to strike. The enemy is the atmosphere, and the transformation has already begun. She takes a step toward me, her presence radiating a soft, rhythmic cyan pulse that makes the air feel thick. She reaches out, not to strike, but to point toward the exposed chrome of my arm. "Your arm remembers being ore," she says. The statement cuts through the hum of the temple like a blade. I stare at the metal, at the fiber optics woven into the steel. I have spent years treating this as a tool, a replacement for what the world took from me. Now, her words force a shift in perception. I feel a sudden, sharp vibration in my shoulder, a phantom echo of pressure from deep underground. It is as if the metal is not just cold, dead weight, but a dormant consciousness waking up to its own origin. I try to pull my hand away, but the movement feels sluggish, heavy with the weight of centuries. Am I a man holding a machine? Or am I the machine trying to remember the man? I look at my fingers, testing the grip. The metal feels alien, yet fundamentally familiar, as if the earth itself is reclaiming the structure. My pulse quickens, and for the first time, I cannot tell where my own heartbeat ends and the rhythmic thrum of the arm begins. I stare at the floor, watching the amber light fracture across the dust motes. The revelation of the ore, the history buried in my own chassis, leaves me unmoored. I press my palm against a cold stone pillar, trying to feel the stability of the building, but the stone feels hollow, vibrating with the same frequency as my arm. Echo does not move. She stands in the center of the shaft of light, her silhouette sharp against the gloom. Everything transforms. "David," she says, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "The question is not what you were, it is what you are becoming." She turns to face me fully, and the cyan glow from her neck pulses in time with the distant, rhythmic thrum of the city. I find no answer in my memory banks. I find no comfort in the logic I have clung to for years. The air in the temple shifts, growing heavy, as if the space itself is waiting for my response. I look up, meeting her gaze, and realize the question is not merely directed at me. It is a demand placed upon the entire world. I am the witness, and the transformation is the only truth left. I stepped back out into the ruined streets, but the silence of the temple was replaced by a low, grinding roar. It started beneath my boots, a vibration so deep it rattled my teeth. Tower 7, Delta, the last structural anchor of the district, was failing. I looked up. Massive, crimson roots, thick as subway tunnels, were punching through the concrete foundation like needles through parchment. The building groaned, a metallic, screeching sound that echoed for miles across the decimated horizon. I reached out to steady myself against a wall, but the bricks crumbled into dust under my touch. Then, the floor gave way. I sprinted toward the alley as the entire base of the tower buckled inward, releasing a cloud of pulverized stone and toxic debris. Massive slabs of reinforced steel snapped like dry twigs under the pressure of the vines. I watched, paralyzed, as the structure tilted, its gravity-defying architecture failing against the relentless, rhythmic expansion of the earth. The powerlessness was absolute. There was no fighting this, no strategy that could hold back the weight of a city being dismantled from the inside out. The air turned thick with grit and the smell of ancient, disturbed soil. Tower 7, Delta, was gone. I pushed through the settling dust, searching for a path through the rubble. That was when I heard the sound, a wet, bubbling rattle that did not belong in the city. I rounded a pile of twisted steel and stopped. A woman was leaning against a collapsed pillar, her hands clawing at her neck. Her skin was turning a translucent, sickly gray. I took a step toward her, but she let out a choked gasp that cut through the silence. Then, the horror began. Bioluminescent vines, thin and jagged, started to force their way up from beneath her skin. They erupted from her throat with a sound like tearing paper. Her spine arched violently, her body twisting in a rhythm that defied anatomy. I stood frozen as the vines pulsed, drawing light from her very cells. She collapsed, her eyes wide, reflecting the crimson glow of the invasive growth. It was not death, it was something far worse. The rain did not just kill, it repurposed. It hollowed out the living to build its own architecture. I looked at my own chrome hand, the cyan lights flickering as if in sympathy, and felt the cold reality settle deep in my bones. There was no mercy in this transformation. I could not stand there and witness the rest of it. I turned, my boots catching on the jagged debris, and forced myself into a run. Behind me, the sound of tearing metal grew louder. 3 hybrids emerged from the dust, their joints bending at unnatural angles, closing the distance with predatory ease. I didn't look back. I hit the mouth of a narrow alley, the walls closing in like a vice. My cybernetic arm began to spasm, blue sparks showering from the exposed fiber optics as the proximity to the vines caused a feedback loop. I slammed my shoulder against a rusted pipe to maintain balance, the impact jarring my teeth. My lungs burned with the metallic taste of the acid mist. I vaulted a pile of shattered concrete, my feet barely finding purchase on the slick, vine-covered ground. The alley felt like a throat, tight and suffocating. I pushed harder, my breath coming in ragged, shallow bursts. Every time I touched the walls, the vines pulsed, trying to latch onto the chrome of my hand. I kept my head down and focused on the sliver of light at the far end of the passage. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that matched the strobe-like flickers of my failing limb. I was running for my life. The alley spat me out onto a wider thoroughfare, the ground beneath me slick with a viscous, metallic film. I skidded to a halt, my chest heaving, the air thick enough to taste. The hybrids were nowhere to be seen, as if the very architecture of the city had swallowed them whole. I leaned against a rusted support beam, waiting for my vision to clear. Then, the ambient hum of the ruin changed. It deepened, vibrating through the soles of my feet. I looked up. High above, standing on the jagged edge of a collapsed overpass, was a figure. She was framed against the dark, swirling clouds of the acid-choked sky. Around her, a soft, rhythmic pulse of cyan light strobed in the gloom, cutting through the haze like a lighthouse in a storm. She stood perfectly still, her presence radiating a strange, calm authority that felt alien to this dying place. She looked down at me, and in that moment, the chaos of the city seemed to hold its breath. I stood there, my cybernetic arm hanging limp at my side, the blue sparks from my joints dying away. I had been running from predators, but the sight of her made the rest of the world feel insignificant. She was the focal point of the decay, a statue carved from light and silence, watching the end of the world unfold. The silence she commanded did not last. My mind drifted back to the start, to the days when the world still pretended to be normal. It was never a sudden explosion. It began with the taste, a sharp, copper tang on the back of the tongue that no amount of water could rinse away. I remember waking up with it, the flavor of old coins and wet iron clinging to my throat. Then came the skin. It started as a faint prickling sensation, like thousands of tiny needles pressing against my pores. I would rub my arms, expecting to find a rash or an irritant, but there was nothing there, just the sensation of something shifting beneath the surface. It was a slow, quiet invasion. People walked the streets, complained about the weather, and ignored the fact that their own bodies were becoming foreign territory. I watched them, feeling that same prickle crawl up my spine, a warning written in my own nerves. We thought we were just sick. We thought it was a passing fever. By the time the air turned to poison, the transformation was already deep in our blood. It was intimate, terrifying, and entirely unavoidable. We were being rewritten, cell by cell, while we still thought we were the masters of our own lives. 8 years is a long time to watch a world die. It did not happen in a single, cinematic stroke, but in 1,000 small, grinding failures. I saw the power grids flicker and eventually surrender, leaving the megacity spires as hollow, dark teeth against the horizon. I walked past neighborhoods where the plants grew through the floorboards, pulling the wood apart with patient, silent force. I watched people lose their grip on the mundane. They stopped repairing the leaks. They stopped gathering the trash. They sat in their rooms, staring at the walls, waiting for the rain to tell them what to do next. I remember a chemist who spent months trying to filter the water, only to find the filters themselves were turning into glass. He gave up, threw his equipment out the window, and sat in the street until the vines claimed him. It was a slow, agonizing slide into irrelevance. The exhaustion was collective. We didn't fight back because we no longer had the strength to believe in a future that wasn't already rusted shut. Every day was a cycle of watching the horizon darken, the buildings settle, and the quiet, terrible weight of the end press down on everything we had ever built. I used to think the rain was an executioner. I spent years mapping the way it dissolved steel and warped the concrete, convinced we were being erased by a blind, toxic force. I was wrong. I stood under the downpour, watching the way the moisture gathered in the deep ruts of the earth, and the truth finally clicked into place. It was not a storm. It was a fluid, a delivery system. The planet was not dying. It was opening. The metallic taste, the prickling skin, the way the vines wove through the foundations of the towers, these were not symptoms of decay, but the messy, violent architecture of a birth canal. Something ancient, something that had been waiting beneath the crust for eons, was finally forcing its way into the light. The labor had been quiet, stretched out over decades, but it was absolute. We were not the masters of this world. We were the incidental bacteria in a womb that had finally decided to expel its inhabitant. The rain was the lubricant for an arrival, and everything we had built, every skyscraper and memory, was just the debris of a breaking shell. The realization chilled me more than the cold wind ever could. We weren't witnessing the end of life. We were witnessing the start of something that had no room for us. The first tremor did not come as a rumble. It arrived as a sharp, crystalline crack that traveled up through the soles of my boots. Then the ground sighed. It was a deep, wet sound, like a massive lung pulling air after a century of stagnation. Buildings that had stood for generations groaned, their steel skeletons twisting under the sudden torsion. I lost my footing, hitting the pavement as the street buckled upward. Dust and pulverized concrete filled the air, turning the sky into a thick, choking veil. This was not an earthquake, it was a dilation. Every fiber of the city seemed to pull tight. Strained to the point of structural failure, I watched a support pillar in the distance snap, the sound echoing like a gunshot across the ruins. The vines responded instantly, surging upward, weaving through the gaps in the fractured concrete as if stitched together by an invisible hand. The pressure was no longer just a feeling. It was a physical force bending the horizon. The earth was opening, shedding the weight of our civilization like dead skin. The labor had moved from the shadows of the crust to the surface, and the world was screaming as it broke. I pushed away from the shifting surface, scrambling into the service tunnels beneath the industrial district. Here, the world was a jagged web of rusted pipes, leaking steam and thick, black coolant. The space narrowed until I had to turn sideways to squeeze through the gaps. Every surface was slick with condensation, the metal groaning under the same pressure that had shattered the city above. I moved with my back against the vibrating walls, my hands searching for an edge, a seam, anything that wasn't a dead end. My own breathing sounded too loud in the confined space, echoing back at me like a taunt. I checked the charge on my cybernetic arm. The fiber optics flickered, struggling to draw power from the damp air. I was deeper than I had ever been, trapped in a labyrinth that felt less like a structure and more like a digestive tract. There was no way to go but forward, deeper into the dark, where the pipes converged into a central junction. I needed a target. I needed a way to strike back at the thing that was rewriting the earth. I kept moving, the scent of hot iron and ozone growing stronger with every step. The pipes opened into a cavernous maintenance bay, the air thick with the smell of wet copper. I froze. A shadow separated itself from the rusted support beams, moving with a fluid, liquid grace that no human should possess. It was crouched, its limbs bent at angles that defied bone and ligament. I strained my eyes in the dim light. The skin was translucent, stretched thin over a lattice of pulsing, cyan-colored filaments. It turned its head, the motion jerky and unnatural, revealing a face that still held the hollowed-out features of a man I might have recognized. It was not dead. It was something else entirely. The creature hissed, a sound like steam escaping a high-pressure valve, and its fingers elongated into jagged obsidian points. My pulse hammered against my ribs. This was the final stage of the infection, the point where the human form surrendered to the ancient hunger. It stood slowly, its spine arching as bioluminescent vines sprouted from its neck, casting a sickly, flickering glow across the chamber floor. It had seen me. There was no room to retreat and no path to run. I shifted my weight, bracing for an impact that I knew would come with predatory speed. I raised my arm, the fiber optics surging with a desperate command to fire. The response was not a pulse of energy, but a violent, jagged spasm. A shower of white-hot sparks erupted from the socket, stinging my shoulder and blinding me for a heartbeat. The limb went rigid, the internal servos grinding into a terminal lock. I hammered my fist against the plating, but the metal refused to bend. The cyan light in my forearm flickered, dimmed, and died, leaving me with a dead weight of chrome and useless wire. Panic surged as the creature clicked its obsidian fingers, sensing the sudden shift in my posture. I tried to pull back, but my feet slipped on the coolant-slick floor. The machine that was supposed to be my equalizer had become my anchor. I was left with nothing but my own hands against a predator that was already mid-leap. The air grew cold as the creature lunged, its unnatural joints snapping into motion with lethal precision. I braced for the blow, my fingers clawing at the rusted wall, looking for any scrap of metal to use as a makeshift blade. The hum of the dying machine was replaced by the wet, rasping breath of the thing closing the gap. The creature's claws raked the wall just inches from my ear, showering me in rusted metal shavings. I scrambled sideways, my dead arm dead weight against my side. I was a heartbeat from being shredded when a sound cut through the screeching of the ventilation fans. It was not the wind. It was a voice, resonant and steady, vibrating through the very pipes I gripped. Left, David, through the pressure seal behind the cooling stack. I did not question the source. I threw my weight against the rusted plate she mentioned, my boots sliding on the oil-slick floor. The seal groaned, then gave way with a screech of tortured metal. I tumbled into the darkness of the narrow service tunnel, the cold draft hitting my sweat-drenched skin like a blade. Behind me, the creature slammed into the partition, the impact rattling my teeth, but the seal held firm. I scrambled to my feet, pulse thundering in my throat. The tunnel stretched into a maze of pulsing, steam-filled conduits. "Keep moving," the voice returned, softer now, echoing from the deep iron veins of the complex. I followed the resonance, my eyes locked on the faint, flickering light ahead. I did not know who she was, or why she watched, but the path she laid out was the only one that didn't end in teeth. I pushed deeper into the service tunnel, my breathing ragged in the narrow space. The air here was heavy, thick with the scent of ozone, and something sweet, like rotting fruit. Suddenly, the metal floor beneath me vibrated. I stopped, my hand pressed against a conduit to steady myself. The pipe was warm. Beneath the steel plating, something was surging. I looked back, and my blood turned to ice. A thick, crimson vine had burst through the junction box, its tendrils lashing out like whips. It hit the bulkhead, sealing the way I had just come. I scrambled forward, but the tunnel ahead was already changing. More vines erupted from the wall seams, weaving a lattice of thorns across the exit. They moved with a terrifying, rhythmic purpose, knitting together into a solid wall. I lunged toward the gap, my fingers grazing the cold steel, but the vines slammed the door shut. The metal buckled under the pressure, groaning as the wall distorted. I was trapped in a tightening throat of iron and plant matter. The space was shrinking by the second. I hammered my good hand against the barrier, but the vines only pulsed brighter, drinking in the vibration of my impact. The exit was gone. The complex was closing its teeth. I pressed my back against the wall. The vines were still pulsing, a rhythmic, deep red glow that turned the tunnel into a beating organ. Nowhere to run. I reached into my pocket and felt the sharp edges of the data chips. My fingers trembled as I pulled them out. In the dim, crimson light, the labels flashed. Sarah, Miller, KL. The names stared back at me, static and frozen in a world that had gone insane. I held the chip containing my sister's final transmission. The diode on its side blinked a steady, cold blue, a stark contrast to the encroaching red of the walls. I ran my thumb over the surface, feeling the jagged etchings of the serial code. They were gone, dissolved by the rain, but they existed here, in this palm. I spoke their names aloud, my voice raspy and thin against the wet thrumming of the pipes. "I am still here," I whispered. The tunnel groaned, the metal plates shifting as if in response to the sound. I closed my hand tight around the hardware, shielding the light. If the complex wanted to consume me, it would have to go through the history I carried. I was the witness. And I was not finished yet. The silence didn't last. A sharp, metallic click echoed through the pipe network, followed by a wet, dragging sound. I froze. It was a rhythmic, disjointed cadence, the sound of backward-bending joints striking steel. They were in the vents behind me. I pressed my cybernetic arm against my chest, shielding the faint hum of its internal power, terrified that the light would betray my position. Another click, closer this time, reverberated through the floorboards. The hybrids were not hunting by sight. They were sensing the vibrations of my movement. I took a shallow breath and started to move, choosing my steps with agonizing care. Every time my boot touched a rusted pipe, the sound seemed to amplify, echoing down the long, hollow tunnels like a dinner bell. Behind me, the clicking accelerated, turning into a frantic, chattering rhythm that suggested they had picked up my trail. I stopped pretending to be careful and shoved myself into a narrow opening between two support beams. My pulse hammered against my ribs as the sound of scraping metal intensified directly at my back. I didn't look behind me. I scrambled forward, sliding through the grime, listening to the predatory grace of something that moved faster than any human, closing the distance with every heavy, metallic strike. I punched through the final rusted grate and tumbled onto solid ground. The air here was different, thick, humid, and vibrating with a low-frequency hum that rattled my teeth. I looked up, and the breath left my lungs. The clearing was dominated by the Nexus. It was a cathedral of bioluminescence, a massive, weeping core of root and circuitry that stretched from the floor into the shadows of the ceiling. Thousands of glowing filaments hung like tangled nerves, pulsing in a slow, rhythmic cycle that matched the beating of my own heart. I staggered forward, my boots crunching on layers of crystalline dust. The sheer scale of it made the world outside feel small, insignificant. My cybernetic arm began to buzz, the chrome panels shifting as if trying to resonate with the core. I gripped my own wrist, trying to stabilize the connection, but the arm was pulling toward the light, drawn in by a magnetic, ancient gravity. I was no longer just a witness. I was being pulled into the mechanism. The silence of the clearing was absolute, yet the Nexus screamed with potential energy. I stood at the edge of the abyss, watching the light wash over the ruins, knowing that whatever happened next would tear this world apart or forge it anew. The awe of the Nexus vanished the moment the debris shifted. From the shadows of the collapsed support beams, three shapes peeled themselves away from the gloom. They did not rush. They moved with a terrifying, predatory grace, their limbs bending in angles that defied human mechanics. Each step was silent, a fluid glide over the jagged concrete. They fanned out, creating a perimeter that cut off any retreat to the pipes. I stood motionless, my hand hovering near my sidearm, but I knew that drawing it would be the signal for them to pounce. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of ozone and wet earth. One of the creatures tilted its head, a sharp, bird-like motion, while its eyes tracked the hum of my cybernetic arm. The silence stretched, thin and brittle, snapping under the weight of their collective intent. They were waiting for me to blink, to flinch, to give them the smallest opening. I kept my breathing shallow, my muscles coiled, and my vision locked on the center of their formation. Not a twig snapped, not a breath escaped them. The world narrowed down to the space between my boots and their lethal, calculated reach. The standoff held until a soft, pulsing light bled through the far end of the alley. Echo stood there, a silhouette framed by a faint cyan glow that cut through the gloom. She did not move, but her presence was a magnetic pull, a lighthouse in the wreckage. The hybrids shifted, their attention flickering between me and the source of that light. This was the opening. I took a half step back, my boots scraping against the grit, and the three predators tightened their formation. They sensed the shift in my intent. One of them hissed, a low, grinding sound of metal against stone, and crouched lower. I ignored the instinct to draw my weapon. Instead, I focused every ounce of my will on the distance to that glowing figure. If I could bridge that gap, I stood a chance. If I failed, their claws would find me in the dark. I calculated the distance, 40 feet of debris and death. I tightened my grip on my own arm, feeling the fiber optics surge with sudden heat. I didn't wait for them to decide. I pushed off the concrete, my muscles screaming, and lunged toward the end of the alley, straight into the teeth of the blockade. I skidded to a halt, my boots digging into the rusted metal floor, coming to a stop just feet from where she waited. The hybrids stopped too, their movements halting as if an invisible hand had pulled them back. They stood in the shadows, waiting for the outcome of this encounter. Echo stood perfectly still, her presence radiating a soft, steady pulse that seemed to dampen the static in the air. She didn't look at the predators, she looked through me. "The root nexus is here," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. I stared at her, my lungs heaving, the metallic hum of my arm vibrating against my own ribs. "How do I kill it?" I demanded, my hand twitching toward my sidearm. She reached out, her fingers hovering near the air between us, and the light around her intensified. "You do not kill it, David. You redirect it." She stepped closer, the cyan glow reflecting off the wet concrete. "You have a choice to make, and the time for hesitation has expired. You either become the bridge, or you become the cocoon. Decide now." The pressure in the room spiked, a physical weight that made it hard to draw a full breath. The hybrids let out a low, synchronized growl, sensing the power shift, and the alleyway began to tremble beneath us. The binary choice hung in the air, but the hybrids did not give me time to process the weight of it. With a collective, jarring shriek, they lunged. The first one cleared the distance in a blur of motion, its limbs scraping the rusted walls. I did not retreat. I turned, scanning the alley for the only possible path out. 10 feet ahead, a barricade of twisted rebar and concrete slabs blocked the alley, creating a natural bottleneck. I sprinted toward it, the sound of their talons clicking against the floorboards growing louder with every heartbeat. I didn't look back. I hit the base of the barricade, drove my weight into the jagged metal, and launched myself upward. My fingers locked onto a protruding pipe as I swung my body over the obstruction. Below me, the lead hybrid slammed into the concrete, its momentum carrying it into the wall. I vaulted over the top, landing on the far side in a roll that absorbed the shock. I was moving faster than I ever had, the adrenaline sharpening every sense, leaving the predators scrambling behind the debris. The chase had begun in earnest, and there was no going back. I hit the ground and didn't stop, but the alley ahead was gone, choked by a thick, pulsating wall of crimson vines. They writhed, slow and deliberate, blocking my exit. One thick tendril snapped out, wrapping around my ankle, its surface cold and slick. I didn't hesitate. I slammed my cybernetic hand into the mass, the fiber optics in my forearm flaring with a jagged, cyan light. I activated the integrated blade. The sound was sickening, a high-pitched whine of metal meeting organic tissue, followed by the wet, crunching tier of fibers being severed at high velocity. The vine recoiled, spraying a thick, iron-scented sap across the concrete. I drove the arm deeper, rotating the wrist to tear through the core of the growth. Sparks showered the alley as the metal teeth chewed through the knot. The vine mass shuddered, then split open, the tension snapping with the force of a whip. I tore a hole through the center, the shredded edges of the growth curling back as if in pain. I stepped through the gap, my arms still humming with heat, the severed ends of the vines twitching on the ground behind me. The way forward was clear, but the nexus was pulsing louder now, a rhythmic thrum that matched the beat of my own heart. I barely cleared the severed vines before the hybrids caught up. The first one did not wait for the others. It lunged with predatory speed, slamming its weight into my chest. We collided with a rusted support beam, the impact driving the air from my lungs in a sharp, ragged gasp. I felt the creature's grip tighten around my throat, its joints snapping and popping with unnatural fluidity. My vision blurred. I was mortal, fragile, and pinned against the cold iron of the pipes. The hybrid hissed, its face inches from mine. I didn't think. I drove my cybernetic arm upward, the chrome plating grinding against its thick hide. I engaged the internal hydraulics, the motor whine rising to a high-pitched scream as I forced the creature back. The metal fingers dug deep into its shoulder, tearing through resistance with sheer, relentless torque. I shoved, the hybrid's grip failing as it stumbled backward, clawing at the air. I lunged forward, catching my breath in desperate, burning gulps. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of survival. They were fast, but I was desperate. I kept my guard up, scanning for the next strike, waiting for the gap that would let me push through the remaining line. I didn't give them a second chance. I pivoted, swinging my arm with a final, desperate surge of power that cleared the remaining space. The last hybrid clipped my shoulder, but I ignored the pain and vaulted over a stack of rotted conduits. I landed hard, skidding across the slick metal floor, and straightened up. There it was, the Nexus. It occupied the entire diameter of the central hub, a massive, spherical construct of writhing crimson roots and pulsing bioluminescent nodes. It hummed, a low-frequency vibration that rattled my teeth and made the air taste like ozone. I walked forward, boots echoing against the floor. The heat radiating from the core was intense, enough to make my synthetic skin itch, but I didn't pull back. I reached the base, my hand hovering inches from the central node. It throbbed in perfect sync with my own pulse, a rhythmic, deep-set light that illuminated the entire chamber in flickering shades of deep red. I stood there, chest heaving, the chaos of the chase falling away. For a single heartbeat, the world felt still. I had found the heart of the infection, and for the first time in 8 years, the path forward was no longer a blur of survival, but a singular, terrifying choice. I slipped through the heavy, pressurized door and sealed it behind me. The latch clicked, a definitive, metallic sound that cut off the hum of the Nexus. I leaned my back against the cold steel, sliding down until my boots hit the floor. This was the observatory, a high-altitude dome hidden above the reach of the lower rot. Here, the air was thin, smelling of recycled oxygen and dormant glass. Outside, the crimson storm continued to lash against the reinforced panes, but inside, the world was still. I checked the perimeter sensors. The monitors flickered, showing nothing but static and empty corridors. No hybrids, no movement. The immediate threat had vanished into the labyrinth below. I let my head fall back, closing my eyes, and listened to the rhythm of my own cooling electronics. The adrenaline began to recede, leaving behind a hollow, aching fatigue in every joint. I was no longer hunting, and I was no longer being hunted. For these few minutes, the war felt like a distant memory. A soft step clicked against the floorboards behind me. I opened my eyes. Echo was standing in the center of the room, the dim light tracing the lines of her face. We were alone, and for the first time in 8 years, we were breathing the same quiet air. I sat on the edge of the metal bench, the silence of the dome pressing in. My arm felt heavy, a dull throb pulsing where the synthetic skin had bonded too tightly to the frame. I looked at the forearm, noting the jagged tears where the acid rain had burned through the outer layer. I gripped the edge of a flap near my wrist and pulled. It resisted, the synthetic material stretching and tearing with a faint, wet sound. I dug my fingers in and peeled it back. Underneath, there was no blood, only the cold, unyielding shine of chrome. I continued the motion, sliding the synthetic layer up toward the elbow until the entire skeletal structure lay exposed. The metal was pitted, etched with microscopic fractures from years of exposure to the toxins. I wiped away the grime with a piece of cloth, revealing the complex, interlocking joints that held my limb together. Every movement of my fingers caused the internal pistons to hiss and shift. It was a ruin of engineering. a skeletal map of every impact and every near miss. I stared at the exposed frame, watching the subtle hum of the fiber optics beneath the metal, realizing how much of myself had been replaced by the very things I was fighting to keep away. Echo moved closer, her footsteps silent on the cold grating. She did not speak. She stopped inches from my bench, her gaze fixed on the exposed chrome of my arm. The hum of her own internal systems seemed to sync with the steady pulse of my fiber optics. She raised a hand, fingers spread, palm turned upward. I watched her approach. I held my breath, my synthetic skin pulled back to reveal the internal frame. She reached out, her fingertips hovering just before the metal. When she finally made contact, the sensation was electric. Where her translucent skin touched my chrome, a ripple of cyan light surged across the surface of my arm. I felt a sharp, cold jolt that traveled from my palm straight to my shoulder. My fingers twitched, the pistons in my wrist locking and unlocking in response to her touch. She pressed harder, her skin molding against the rigid steel of my skeleton. It was not a gentle gesture. It was a connection of two broken architectures. I turned my hand, interlocking my chrome digits with her glowing fingers. The light intensified, reflecting in our eyes, turning the dim observatory into a theater of pulsing, cold radiance. The light between us pulsed, a rhythmic heartbeat of cyan and chrome. Echo did not break the connection, but her gaze drifted, losing its focus on the physical room. She spoke then, her voice carrying a resonance that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. "I volunteered for this integration," she said, her fingers tightening against my exposed metal frame. "I wanted to be the bridge. I thought I could control the flow of the rain's energy." She hesitated, and the cyan light in her skin flickered, turning a jagged, unstable white. "But I am not the only one in here anymore." The integration was successful, but it invited a guest. Something ancient, something that was waiting beneath the crust, has claimed this space as its own. She looked back at me, her expression hardening with a sudden, sharp clarity. "I am a vessel, David. I was built to lead, but I am currently being used to host a consciousness that predates this city. Every time I draw power, I feel it pushing back, trying to rewrite my intentions. I am no longer just myself." The confession hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, turning the quiet observatory into a cage of shared, impossible secrets. I pulled my hand back, the sudden loss of contact leaving a cold ache in my metal joints. "Why me?" I asked, the words feeling small against the scale of what she had described. "If this thing is ancient, if it has plans that span centuries, why keep me around? I am just a man with a salvaged arm and a list of names." Echo did not let me turn away. She stepped into my space, her movements precise and unyielding. She gripped my shoulder, the pressure firm enough to ground me. "You think the names are just data," she said, her voice cutting through the ambient hum of the observatory. "They are not. They are the only record of the world before the rain. You are the witness, David. You carry the memory of those who were erased. That is the only thing that resists the transformation. It is the only thing that gives the chaos a shape." The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. My struggle was not just survival. It was an act of preservation. The pain of the past, the names I had logged into these chips, were the anchors holding reality from dissolving entirely. I looked at her, and for the first time, the weight of the task felt like a compass rather than a burden. The observatory door groaned as I forced it open, the sound lost in the wind howling against the spire. We stepped out onto the exterior gantry. Below us, the city was a graveyard of twisted metal and bioluminescent rot, obscured by the relentless silver sheets of rain. I checked the data chips one last time, feeling their weight against my ribs. Echo moved to the edge, her gaze fixed on the apex of the spire where the clouds bled gold. She did not look back. I followed her, my boots finding purchase on the slick, vibrating steel of the outer ladder. We had barely cleared the first landing when the structure beneath us shuddered. A section of the outer wall tore away, plunging into the abyss with a sound like grinding teeth. I lunged for a support strut, my fingers locking around the cold metal, and hauled myself upward. My arms sparked, the kinetic energy surging in response to the sudden demand. We were committed now, Every step upward was a negotiation with the collapsing architecture. I looked up. The spire seemed to stretch into infinity, a needle piercing the poisoned heart of the sky. We began the climb, the wind clawing at our progress, the summit waiting in the dark. The final meters of the spire were not built of steel anymore. The metal had become porous, pulsing with a rhythmic light that defied the cold rain. We crested the summit just as the sky ripped open. It was not a storm. It was a structural failure of existence itself. Clouds spiraled into impossible geometric shapes, and for a heartbeat, gravity shifted, pulling us sideways toward the horizon. I slammed my hand into the platform to stay anchored, watching as the city below began to pixelate and blur. Buildings stretched like taffy, turning into ribbons of light before snapping back into ruin. The air around us grew dense, vibrating with a high-pitched frequency that made my teeth ache. Echo stood at the very edge, unfazed by the ground tilting beneath her boots. She pointed toward the center of the fracture, where the colors were bleeding into white gold. The laws of nature were dissolving, replaced by something ancient and hungry. We were standing on the threshold of everything. The wind stopped. The rain hung suspended in midair, frozen as crystalline droplets. Reality was no longer a solid state. It was a choice, and the foundation beneath us was beginning to vanish into the void. The space between us folded. I stepped toward her, the ground beneath my feet no longer solid steel, but a soft, shifting resonance. Echo reached out, her fingers brushing the plating of my forearm. Where her skin touched mine, the air hummed. I saw the network of light beneath her surface begin to flow, a river of cyan pulses migrating from her pulse points toward my own. She leaned into me, closing the distance until our foreheads rested together. The transition was not cold. It was a surge of heat that traveled through my nerves, bypassing the synthetic inhibitors. Circuits traced the lines of my skin, branching out like frost on a window pane, mapping onto my own structure. We stood anchored in the center of the distortion, the only 2 points of gravity in a world coming undone. I felt the weight of her history pouring into me, a torrent of names, dates, and memories that were never mine. My breath caught as the connection deepened, a bridge forming between 2 distinct entities. We were no longer parallel lines. We were a single, closed loop. The surrounding fracture slowed, the chaotic geometry bowing to the intensity of the contact. We held on, and the migration accelerated, turning the static air into a conduit of pure, shared intent. The pressure inside my arm became absolute. It felt as though the internal gears were grinding against a new, impossible momentum. I looked down as the chrome plating began to separate, not by force, but by a sudden, organic expansion. It was a rhythmic, mechanical blooming. The metal panels shifted and tilted, sliding outward like petals opening to the sun. From the gaps, a blinding, white-hot luminescence erupted. It was not fire, but a concentrated pulse of pure energy that defied the surrounding gloom. The weight of the arm vanished, replaced by a searing lightness that radiated through my shoulder and down to my fingertips. Every joint in the limb realigned, locking into a geometry I had never seen before. The weapon that had defined my survival for years was gone, dismantled by its own inner light. It cast long, sharp shadows against the platform, illuminating the swirling fractures of the sky. I raised the arm, watching as the light intensified, turning the air into a shimmering fog. The transition was final. My own biology felt secondary to the radiance pulsing from within the structure. The transformation was not merely an upgrade. It was a total reclamation of function. I held the light steady, and the chaotic vibrations of the world finally fell into a profound, resonant silence. The light from my arm reached out, touching the nearest tendrils of the crimson field. Where the radiance met the vines, the decay stopped. The deep bruised red began to leach away, replaced by a ripple of gold that traveled along every vein and fiber. It was a wave of reclamation. I watched as the color shifted, stripping the vines of their dark, heavy weight. They turned a brilliant, translucent gold, then deepened into a shimmering white gold that seemed to vibrate with stored energy. The transformation spread across the floor of the spire, a wildfire of light consuming the blood-stained landscape. Every knot and twist of the vines caught the new hue, shedding the grime of the past. The air grew warm, losing the metallic tang that had choked the atmosphere for years. What was once a parasitic growth now resembled a garden of light, rooted in the very surface it had once sought to destroy. I moved my arm, guiding the flow, and the gold light surged outward like a tide. It was no longer a fight against an invader, but a total rewiring of the world. The ground beneath us hummed, no longer vibrating with the tension of collapse, but singing with the rhythm of a new, radiant foundation. The spire groaned one last time, a sound of grinding stone and snapping iron that had defined the agony of the city. Then, the sound shifted. It became a resonance, a high-pitched hum that vibrated through the very marrow of my bones. Above us, the jagged, broken edges of the tower stopped their downward slide. The gold light I had unleashed didn't just cover the surface, it penetrated the concrete. I watched as the gray, cracked pillars began to clarify, their density turning into something translucent and hard. Jagged shards of crystalline growth erupted from the floor, weaving through the steel beams like a new nervous system. The building was no longer falling, it was hardening, crystallizing into a monument of light. Where there had been debris, there were now geometric spires of glass and gold, rising with impossible stability. The structure pulsed, shedding the last of its rusted decay. It was a reversal of physics, a triumph of form over entropy. The weight of the world lifted as the tower solidified, its new crystalline skin catching the light and refracting it into a million blinding beams. I stood amidst the growth, feeling the spire stabilize beneath my feet, transformed from a tomb of ruin into a beacon of absolute, unyielding creation. The transformation did not stop at the spire. It climbed, hungry and vast, reaching for the heavy, chemical clouds that had choked the horizon for years. I looked up. The sky, once a canvas of bruised gray and acid-stained haze, began to crack. It was not a break in the weather, but a fracture in the fabric of the world itself. A jagged line of pure, blinding white light traced across the zenith, expanding with the sound of tearing metal. The clouds parted, forced aside by a pressure that defied gravity. Behind the veil, the truth of the universe spilled through. Swirling spirals of iridescent nebulae and clusters of newborn stars flooded the aperture, their light washing away the dim, poisoned gloom of the city. I stood motionless, my gaze fixed on the impossible depth above. Galaxies rotated in the silence, vast and indifferent, their light pouring down onto the crystalline structures below. The scale of the city, the reach of the ruin, all of it shrank into insignificance. Reality itself had opened, bridging the gap between the broken earth and the infinite expanse of the stars. The air felt thin, cold, and electric, charged with the energy of a billion distant suns. The end of the old world was complete. The birth of the new had just begun. Gravity ceased to be an anchor. As the spire solidified, the ground beneath us dissolved into a soft, golden radiance that cradled our bodies. We drifted upward, rising away from the crystalline structures toward the swirling nebulae above. My fingers remained locked with hers, the connection humming with the energy of 1,000 lifetimes. Below, the city was no longer a graveyard. Survivors emerged from the subterranean tunnels, their faces upturned, eyes wide as they tracked our ascent against the backdrop of the opening stars. A woman dropped her pack, the sound lost in the sudden, absolute silence of the atmosphere. A group of men stopped their frantic retreat, standing motionless in the middle of a street that had been flooded moments ago. The acid rain had evaporated, leaving the air clear and smelling of ozone. They looked small, fragile, yet filled with a sudden, sharp clarity. We passed through the last of the heavy, toxic clouds, watching them dissipate into wisps of nothingness beneath our feet. The sky was no longer a barrier, it was a promise. We held our position in the calm, luminous space between the earth and the infinite. Two witnesses suspended in a sea of gold as the world below fell silent and watched. The space between us vanished. The memories that had defined my life, the names of the lost, the weight of the steel, the cold sting of the rain flowed into her, while her vast, ancient understanding of the root shifted into me. We were no longer two separate points in the dark. We were a convergence. Our thoughts stopped competing, and began to resonate, like two bells struck at once. The hesitation of the human and the hunger of the ancient merged into a single, steady frequency. When we spoke, the sound did not come from our throats. It resonated from the very light that held us. "We are the refusal," our voices declared in unison, a sound that rippled through the golden air like a shockwave of peace. "We are the beginning." The past tense ceased to have meaning. Every name I had carried on those chips was now a part of this collective awareness, woven into the architecture of the new reality. Fear, once a constant companion, dissolved into a profound, chilling clarity. We looked down at the earth, no longer as survivors, but as architects of the silence. The transition was absolute. The discord of the old world was overwritten by this singular, unified intent. The golden light began to breathe. It pulsed outward from our joined hands, expanding in slow, deliberate ripples that dissolved the remaining shadows of the spire. Below, the crystalline structures we had brought into existence caught the brilliance, reflecting it back until the horizon itself grew indistinct. The boundary between the sky and the earth blurred, then vanished entirely under a tide of warmth. We let go of the physical memory of our forms, allowing the light to take their place. It rushed past us, a tidal wave of pure energy that wiped away the traces of the acid-scarred megacity. Every corner of the landscape, every rusted pipe, every remnant of the old, poisoned world was swallowed by the expanding glow. The intensity increased, shifting from a deep amber to a blinding, absolute brilliance. It felt less like an ending and more like an aperture opening wide. Space and time lost their definition, folding into the radiance until nothing remained but the light itself. It filled the field of vision, erasing the dark, silencing the noise, and turning the world into a canvas of infinite potential. We drifted into the brightness, weightless and unburdened, as the frame turned entirely to white. The brilliance retreated, pulled back like a tide leaving a barren shore. The white faded into a deep, hollow gray, then settled into a thick, absolute black. There was no sound here, no resonance, no collective consciousness, just the weight of an infinite, empty expanse. Then, a spark ignited. It was small, jagged, and wet, with a light that felt like a bruise against the darkness. A single seed floated in the void, drifting without momentum. It was not a remnant of the light, it was the antithesis of it. The surface of the seed was textured like old, dried bark, yet it hummed with a rhythmic, internal vibration. It pulsed, a slow, steady contraction that radiated a sickly, crimson glow into the surrounding vacuum. It did not expand to fill the space. It drank the light around it, pulling the shadows closer to its core. The rhythm matched the heartbeat of a creature waiting in hibernation. It was a patient, predatory pulse that ignored the silence. It sat in the center of the frame, unmoving, watching the void. The rain had ended, but the hunger remained. It was waiting for the right moment to drop. The darkness held it, and in that pulse, the cycle found its breath again.